Sociopaths. Sociopaths are so difficult to deal with. And one of the reasons why they're so difficult is because it's hard to really track why they do what they do. If they're family members of yours, that makes it even more difficult. And I think, that's why so many families end up traumatized and dysfunctional and destabilized. It's hard to pinpoint a sociopath, and it's even harder to understand why they do what they do. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about that sociopathic parent. Last video we talked about family roles, and so in today's video I'm going to highlight those family roles in some ways by discussing the sociopath and signs that you have one right in your family. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For all of you who are subscribed, and for those who are new, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's jump in. Sociopaths are really difficult individuals, and it's no wonder why the research says it's really difficult to treat them. Not only is it difficult to treat them, but it's also difficult to get them into counseling. If you want to get a sociopath into counseling, you really do need to either threaten them with a divorce or threaten them with something that's going to ruin their reputation. They're going to have to be fired or lose their job, which gives them some sense of importance or prestige, or they're going to have to be forced by the law. Other than that, most sociopaths do not believe that they are the problem, and if they are within a family that's pretty complicated and it's dysfunctional, and there's some trauma within the family as well, it's going to make it even worse, for families to try to get that sociopath into treatment. So sociopaths are really complicated individuals. Now, before we jump into the 11 signs that you have a sociopath in your family, I want to highlight a little bit of the diagnostic course here. So, there's a couple of ways to diagnose a sociopath. One of the ways is by watching patterned behavior, okay? Patterned behavior. What I mean by that is behavior that started at a certain point and it continued over a specific course of time. So, for example, there's some research that suggests that kids with untreated ADHD combined type, which means, here's how it looks right here on paper. Basically what this means is that you have both inattention, so the inability to pay attention for long periods of time, and then you also have hyperactivity and impulsivity. So, if you have ADHD that's untreated and it's pretty severe and it interrupts your life and you have a hard time studying, paying attention in school, listening, really focusing on, what you should be focusing on, you may be a little bit more, impulsive and behavioral than other kids. And you also may have some immaturity about you that's really different from the other kids. That kind of ADHD can, if not treated, can then transform into oppositional defiant disorder. So here's how it looks on paper. ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, is not just an oppositional difficult kid. Oppositional defiant disorder entails a kiddo who just cannot, not necessarily will not, right? Cannot conform to the ways of society and to rules and to structure and to boundaries. They intentionally push buttons on adults and people to get what they want, right? They are high manipulators. That's usually what I call them when I bring families into my office with kids who have ODD. They're highly intelligent, but they're extremely and extraordinarily manipulative, and they know what to do to get their way. Now, some kids who are treated appropriately and soon enough that have oppositional defiant disorder, they can kick that and they can become a little bit more functional in society. But those kids who are really severe and there's a very poor structure within the home, and school may be contributing some stress, some bullying, some failing grades, bad behaviors, tardiness, all of that stuff in school can then add on to that oppositional defiant child's world, or, to the risk factors, which are, that he's not doing well in school, or, mom is not available, there's drugs, there's teen pregnancy, those risk factors. So if all of that is going on in the oppositional defiant child's life, then it's likely that kid is not going to get the appropriate treatment that is needed. And so that can then transform into conduct disorder. And here's how it looks on paper. Conduct disorder is basically, I have surpassed impulsivity and hyperactivity. I have surpassed, not being able to focus in school. I am now in a stage of severe, moderate to severe juvenile delinquency, right? I've passed ADHD. I've even passed oppositional defiant disorder, although I may have some oppositional tendencies. I am way further advanced than oppositional defiant disorder. I am now engaging in fire setting, animal cruelty, stealing cars, rape, sexual assault, skipping school, forgery, burglary, robbery, right? These kiddos are now becoming young criminals, for lack of a better word. If that is not treated appropriately, which a lot of times it's too late by that time. I used to work over 7 or 8 years ago. I used to work in a juvenile delinquent center for African American and Hispanic boys only. And I loved working with those boys. I really did. And they protected me and they told me, we got your back, Miss T. And they were just wonderful kiddos, Just really bad upbringing, drug abusing parents, absent parents, all of that. Wonderful boys. The problem was that when you put them in society, then they have a hard time functioning. And that's when you see the burglary, the robbery, the manipulation, the stealing, the cheating, the lies, the deception, the pathological line. You see all of that come out. It's amazing how, that dynamic works there. But these kiddos, although very sweet with me in that particular detention center setting, they could not function in society. And so they ended up being brought back. So I remember police bringing many of these kiddos to my office for therapy, and they would be shackled hands and feet, sometimes on probation, for really heinous crimes, and also for things like petty crimes, petty theft, all that kind of stuff. When a kid gets to that point, and nothing is changing, and they're already 18, 19, 20, 21. Now we're looking at the next stage, and that's the final stage, which is antisocial personality disorder. Now, these particular kiddos, if they're not treated appropriately or they're not rehabilitated through their legal program, their psychotherapeutic program, their behavioral program, then they can become antisocial adults. Now, I'm not talking about just the person who doesn't want to be bothered with society and could stay in 12 months, of the year and be fine. That's me sometimes, that's many of us. But I'm talking about the antisocial individual who's more of a sociopath. They are not very empathetic. Those kind of individuals really do grow out of conduct disorder. And so that's what I mean when I say that, sociopaths start off a certain way, and sometimes there's like a ladder that sociopath climbs before they actually get to become a sociopath. So I talk a lot about that right up here in this video right here. So let's jump into the 11 signs that you have a sociopath in your family. So the first sign that you have a sociopath in your family, oh boy, is impulsivity and rash decisions. Now, anytime I counsel a family or I see a family for consultations, I'm well aware of the dynamics once I put myself within the middle of that family. And one of the things that I have seen perpetually over the 13 years I've trained as a therapist is the impulsivity and rash decision making of a sociopath. They cannot process clearly, adequately, maturely what they need to do. They always take steps backwards, right? They're very amateurish in how they arrive at decisions. They do what their heart and their desires and their impulses want them to do. They don't know how to pause, pump the brakes, process, then move. They move, and then when something happens, then they pause, pump the brakes, and try to figure out what happened. And so, these individuals are very rash, very impulsive. Now, the next thing that you're likely to see is multiple failed relationships. And one of the reasons why I bring this up is because most relationships with a sociopath, they are shallow. Okay, they are very superficial. There is nothing emotional about them. Now, they may trigger the emotions of somebody else, right? Because you're not the sociopath. So they may trigger your emotions, but they're not going to become emotionally attached. They're not going to feel warmed by anybody, right? They're not in love. They may be in lust, but they're not in love. So these kind of individuals, they have multiple failed relationships because the relationships tend to be impulsive. They tend to be short-term, short-lived, one-night stands, maybe 6 months, 3 months, maybe not even a month. And they also tend to be very superficial and shallow. The next thing that you're likely to see is parent-child relational conflict. That's constant. Now, all kids have issues with their parents, and all parents, have issues with their children. Like, you're never going to agree 100% of the time. There's going to be something that you guys are going to clash on. No matter how close I am with my mother, we still butt heads sometimes, partly because we're so much alike, but secondly, just because we're mother and daughter, Thankfully, we don't clash a lot, but when we do, we clash. And I'm like, nope, that's not how I'm seeing this, Mom. And and then we have to work through that, But there are some children who are constantly in conflict with their parents, and it's because they want the upper hand. They want the dominance. They want the control. They want to be up here, and they want the parent to be down here. When I disagree with my mother, or you disagree with your mother, you guys may be at odds temporarily, but soon it kicks in that, wait a minute, she is the mother. She is the, the head of the family here. Let me just readjust my view and see what it is that maybe I'm missing, right? That's kind of like the humble approach. And sometimes I'll wrestle with my mom and say, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it that way. And then other times, you can agree to disagree. Not so with a sociopath. They're going to fight you tooth and nail. They are stubborn. They are angry. They are hostile, right? Controlling. And they want to dominate that parent-child relationship. So, long-term, failed, chronic relationship with parent or parent with child. Okay. The next thing that I have on my list is no empathy for anyone, and no empathy specifically for children. Now, what I mean by this is a sociopathic mother or father is not going to have the parental empathy that he or she needs to take care of their child. It just doesn't exist. It's gone. And as a result, that child is emotionally detached from that parent, and there's not a lot of love and affection that should be present in a relationship between a parent and a child, right? There's no empathy there. They don't care how long you cry at night. They just want the next hit. They don't care how much the baby has an ear infection and is teething and needs to be seen by the doctor. They just want to sleep around and date the next guy. So there's a lot of child neglect. There's a lot of child abuse. There's a lot of, which is my next one, emotional and sexual incest. Now, I talk a lot about emotional incest in this video right up here. And I also mentioned sexual incest in this video right up here about psychopathic fathers. Emotional incest is basically an inappropriate relationship with a child. And it may be that the father has intense emotions for that child as if they are dating. And it could be that maybe that mother is making her son the surrogate father of the younger children. And as you'll see in the video that I pointed out a little bit ago, emotional incest can take many forms, and it can also be very difficult to pinpoint when it's happening, but it does happen in a lot of single parent family homes, and a lot of families where there's a lot of scapegoating and black sheeps, and there's a lot of clowns in the family, for lack of a better word. That's a clinical family role, guys. Clown, or the mascot. And or families where there's lack of boundaries. This does happen quite a bit. So you'll see in that video, I'll talk a little bit more about that there. I do talk about that there. The next thing that you are likely to see would be miscommunication and pathological lying. So, sociopaths within the family dynamic, they look for all kind of ways to manipulate. You're probably somebody who has seen this in your family. You'll go to a family member and you have a conversation with them, and then you talk to another family member, and what you talked about is given differently to another family member. So in other words, let's say you're talking to your cousin about your divorce that's coming up, and you know for sure that you told this person this, and this, and you go to your sister, and your sister says, hey, I just spoke to, cousin Kelly, and she told me this was going on. And you sit there like, I didn't say that, right? So miscommunication is sometimes a weapon that a sociopath will use to manipulate the family dynamic. So, that kind of an individual I regard as a triangulator, and I talk about that right up here in this video about family roles. A pathological liar is just what the word says it is. It's a liar that constantly lies, and it's at a level of clinical dysfunction. We're not talking about somebody who just lies about everything at all times and lives in a fantasy world. We're talking about a pathological liar who would lie to a police officer, lie to a judge, lie about a marriage or a relationship, lie about sexually abusing someone, right? Lie about doing something illegal. So we're talking about the criminal liar, the one that lies and lies and lies and doesn't believe that he or she will get caught. So that's the pathological liar. I talk about them right up here in this viral video. Now, there's another thing as well. I also wanted to mention earlier, so I'll mention it now, traumatic bonding. Traumatic bonding is something else that's likely to happen in a family where there's a sociopath. It's really easy to manipulate a situation to a point where the child can't decipher, is mom for me or not for me? Why is she nice sometimes and not nice other times? Why is she loving one minute and not loving the next minute, right? Traumatic bonding is an inability to really identify the negative parts of that parent because you're so conflicted. You're conflicted because that parent shows you different sides of themselves so much that you can't determine what's the real self, right? What's the real parent? So you kind of drop the negative view of that parent and you embrace the good, because deep down, what child doesn't want a good parent, right? Traumatic bonding. The next thing I have on here is deception and disconnect from reality. Sociopaths live in a fantasy world. Everything revolves around them. You don't exist. You exist in their world, and that's how they see things. The next and the last that I have on my list is long-standing pattern of behavior. So we talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the video. If a behavior started at this point and it continues to grow over time, then it's a long-standing pattern of behavior. It's not like this is a behavior that's going to happen today and go away tomorrow, or it's going to happen this year and go away next year. This is a long-term, chronic, pervasive pattern of behavior that's really ingrained. And the more that individual develops within a family and they grow up in a family and they learn the family dynamics and the family roles, that really cements the long-term, pervasive, chronic, dysfunctional behavioral pattern. You know, it's really hard to deal with sociopaths within the family, so I hope that this video was helpful. Thank you so much for being with me today in this video. Go ahead and give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and hit that subscribe button if you want to stick around with us, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.